Hi, this is Bruce Rawles, and I'm speaking again with Gary Renard and Cindy Lora-Renard. It's my pleasure to talk with them again. And we're going to talk about A Course in Miracles, among other things. So welcome, Gary and Cindy.
Hey, Bruce.
Hi, Bruce.
How's it going? I understand you just got back from a cruise to Hawaii. Want to talk about that first, or anything else, any other news? And I know Cindy has a new book, and Gary's new book is almost out, so we could certainly talk about that.
A Course in Health and Well-Being. I'll talk about that in a little bit.
Please do, please do.
Yeah. Forward by Gary Renard.
Forward by Gary Renard.
Hey, I've got one of those too. Thank you, by the way, for that.
Well, yeah, we just got back from Hawaii, and it was great. It was fabulous. For this cruise, it's a one-week cruise, and you fly to Honolulu, and you leave from there at night. And that alone is worth the trip. You just got to see it to believe it. And you go to Maui, and you stay overnight, 2 nights, and then you go to the Big Island of Hawaii. And there's both sides, the Hilo side and the Kona side. And then you go to Kauai, and you leave via the Nepali coast. And it's a great ship called the Pride of America. And there's something about it has a really good vibe to it, the energy, the feeling that you get there. It really fits Hawaii. But I've always wanted to do this because I've been to Hawaii many times, but I knew that I'd get a different perspective of it from the water. And you really do. And it was just a great experience. Both Cindy and I had a wonderful time. And Cindy got up and sang one night, which I thought was really cool.
They had a karaoke bar. So, of course, I'm going to get up and sing. And that was fun. Yeah. And, well, for one thing, Gary surprised me with this trip, actually. We were just in Hawaii 2 months ago doing our retreat that we do every year in August. And then he says, like, a couple weeks later, oh, I'm going to book us a cruise in 2 months to Hawaii. So we're going back in 2 months. And I just couldn't, it was surreal for me because we were just there. And I couldn't believe we were actually going to do a cruise and so quickly. But he has, like he said, it's been a dream of his for a long time to do this. So we did. And it really was enjoyable. I mean, everybody on the cruise was in celebration mode, it seemed. Everybody was so joyful and happy. And we did a lot of excursions, saw lots of interesting things and sights. And it was a really incredible. I think what struck me the most was at night when you're in the middle of the ocean like that. And then we've done cruises before, so it's not like I was foreign to that, but this was a little different. I don't know, something about the open night sky. I mean, for a dream, it's really pretty. For a dream, you know, it can be pretty. And the night sky was really, really beautiful. And our stateroom that we got was in the very back of the ship. So our view was the wake, you know, and the whole back scene of the ships we got to see it leaving port, and we would look at the view from the back room, and it was just incredible.
Yeah, we had a balcony, so we got to sit out on the balcony and watch everything.
Yeah, it was really lovely.
And there was no moon, so you could see the stars really well.
Yeah.
And the views you can't even describe. They're just absolutely beautiful.
Big swath of the Milky Way, that kind of thing.
I freaked out a couple times. I mean, in a fun way. I was just letting loose, and I was listening to music on our balcony. I was singing up to heaven. I was singing out to the sea. All the sea creatures dancing on our stateroom, and I was really letting loose. It was so fun. It's fun to do that sometimes, and you know. And this is why I talk about a little bit of laughter and joy in my book, because it's really good to just let go and laugh and enjoy, be in your joy, whatever helps bring that experience. Great, right? For me, it's sometimes doing things like that, just listening to music and singing and dancing and whatever it is that helps feed that experience.
Exactly.
You know?
A good example of that is the other day, my wife Nancy got a little cardboard box and cut holes in it put some of the cat toys in it for our 2 cats, and they were amused with that for a couple of days. But then the real dynamite discovery was that putting a little bit of bird seed in that same box and putting it right next to the sliding glass door on the back of the deck, the chipmunks would come and dive into those little holes to get the bird seed, and the cats were just like totally enthralled. I mean, they were like worn out at the end of the day from so much attention. So anyway, so we've been getting a big kick out of that lately.
Yeah.
So.
Aw.
Just simple, silly, fun stuff. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good reminder that it can be light and
Exactly.
fun.
Exactly.
Take again everything very so seriously, and it can be silly. Yeah. Remember to laugh. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
we always try to remind people it's okay to have a good time.
Yeah.
And it's okay to have a happy dream. You know, we do have a responsibility, according to A Course in Miracles, and that's to do our part in forgiveness. And that does take vigilance. But aside from that, you know, it's okay to enjoy the dream, just like it's okay to go into a movie theater and enjoy the movie. You know, and a lot of people, they take the Course so seriously that they forget that it's all right to lighten up and have a good time. And as long as you're doing your forgiveness work, then it should lead to love, and it should lead to, you know, lightheartedness, kind of like automatically. It's not like, you know, you got to work at it. It just becomes a way of being. And a lot of people will say to us when we share experiences like this, well, don't you know it's just an illusion? And don't you know that you're not supposed to do anything? And don't you know that you're not supposed to have a good time, that this is really serious? And we're like, actually, that's not what the Course says. The Course talks about a happy dream. It talks about being a happy learner. One of the 10 characteristics of a teacher of God is joy. You know, so there's a means to get there, certainly, and that is forgiveness. But the key to forgiveness is not making it real.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's like, you know, if you're, you know, made aware of a situation that upsets you a little bit, then you have to remember that if you're upset, you're making it real. Because if you weren't making it real, then you wouldn't be upset. You know, so I think people tend to forget that they tend to make things real. So then they make us real, and we're making the point that none of it's real, and that it's okay to enjoy it because it's not real. Not because it's real, but because it's not real. It's okay to not be at the effect of it, and to remember that you're dreaming. Because if you remember that you're dreaming, then you're not at the effect of it, because it's just a dream. But if you forget that you're dreaming, then you are at the effect of it. So at one point, the Course says that awareness of dreaming is a function of the miracle worker. So as long as you can remember that it's just a dream and that it's not real, then you can go to not being at the effect of it and get to the point where it can't hurt you. You know, so at one point, the Course says about this kind of forgiveness, it says that it denies the ability of anything not of God to affect you. You know, so now you're saying the world can't hurt me, it can't affect me, where if you're making it real, you're practically asking it to hurt you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lately I've been thinking that the word mercy is a really useful word, and applied by the ego and the Holy Spirit, right, has totally different meaning. Because from the ego's perspective, we're at the mercy of everything that seems to be outside of ourselves, because we're not beholding the great projection, as of course says, as a projection. But from the Holy Spirit's perspective, we can afford to be merciful to everyone, everything, because we're remembering that you know, for following that guidance and seeing that it is a dream, as you've been pointing out so eloquently. Then it's like, yeah, why not be happy and why not have fun with it? And then there's no reason to not be kind, gentle, merciful, and have fun with it, right? So.
Yeah, I think too that I think all of us know sometimes it's not always easy to act as if it's a dream. Right. Like we might intellectually can say, oh, this is a dream, but sometimes there's still very strong resistance to, you know, to really choosing it and then really feeling peace. And I always like to remind people because I also need the reminder sometimes. And I like to remind people, I know, I mean, we're not saying we're always perfect at this either. I want to make that clear. But so sometimes when, you know, your peace is disturbed, I think it's important to remember that just do the steps anyway, even if the peace doesn't come right away, because sometimes it doesn't. And people always say, well, I am doing forgiveness, I'm doing all this, but I don't feel the peace. Still do it. In other words, it's just the reminding of the mind anyway. This is what I do. And it does help when I just say the words sometimes, even if I don't feel it right away. If peace doesn't return instantly, you know what, so what? It will come as a process when it's done over and over again, and you're being vigilant only for God and his kingdom daily. Like you just practice that daily. Peace will come. It might not come all at once though sometimes, but sometimes it does. You might have these pleasant surprises where because of your forgiveness work, you're quicker in the experience of the peace that comes to you. So I just want to remind people that just do the steps in your mind, even if you don't feel it. Just do the actual forgiveness steps. Say right-minded thoughts, whatever works for you, that for you means your innocence. It could be some lines from the Course that remind you to come back to that. Remind yourself, well, maybe I don't feel peaceful, but I can still remember though, I can still think about the ideas in my mind, and I trust, then giving it over and trusting that as you do this, regularly, you are training the mind. The guilt is being removed, as you do the steps anyway. Just do it anyway. And that's the point I want to make, because, the goal is, the goal is not to try to make a perfect world or make people be perfect in regards to behavior. And we tend to assign roles to people in the world according to our own perception, the ego's perception, how we want things to be. We assign these roles, and when people and the world doesn't fulfill those roles, we get upset. And the Course is teaching us not to make a perfect world around you and have people be perfect or something. It's more about that you can, though, have perfect peace. You can learn to have perfect forgiveness. You can learn that, but let the world, which is an effect, take care of itself, which the world will when you are choosing the correction in your mind. There's nothing in the world that is the cause of anything. Nothing. The world, bodies aren't cause. And it's very tempting. And I think all of us fall from time to time back into that trap of still making the world real. But it's just the gentle reminders daily with non-judgment, daily, that undoes the ego. Not that you have to be perfect in regards to behavior. Just remember and just do the steps in your mind. And the peace will come eventually. More and more will become your experience.
Yeah, and speaking of forgiveness, Cindy showed her book, which is only been out for three months, and I'm going to show my new book, which is coming out any day now, November 14th. It's called Lifetimes When Jesus and Buddha Knew Each Other. The subtitle is A History of Mighty Companions, and we can talk about that a little bit. I wanted Cindy to talk a little bit about her book because it's being very well received. I'm really happy for her and kind of excited about it.
Oh, that's very nice.
A course in it's called A Course in Health and Well-Being, and it really is a course in health and well-being.
There we go. Perfect.
We're just having some fun.
I would say those are two mighty companion books right there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that the book is the thing, but they can be nice symbols and catalysts for decisions in our mind, right? Exactly.
They're not real, but they're mighty.
I want to say that I'm very well aware that this book was really for me first. In other words, this is not, writing this book was not because, I'm trying to make everybody else, you want to be truly helpful. I want to be truly helpful. But I'm always aware that everything I do with the Course is always for me. And then once I can accept the messages myself, I can extend them. And that's what this book is. It's an extension, just wanting to share, the ideas, but I'm on the same path as everyone else. And as a teacher of A Course in Miracles, I don't like it to make it seem like I always have it all figured out either. Sometimes, I have a tough time with things. But what I do is I just come back to forgiveness. That's all. I come back to forgiveness, and I just do the best I can. And I do the steps that the Course is giving us, you know. But my book was born from inspiration to give people answers to certain questions that come up in our workshops, a lot around the areas of health and well-being, areas of body issues, pain, you know, illnesses and things like that. We get so many questions about that. So what I wanted to do is take those specific themes and just expand on them, and from the Course's perspective. That's what I do.
Is there any specific suggestions you want to mention from the book as an example?
Well, in the book I cover, there's a chapter called Empowering Ways to Deal with Pain. And also there's a chapter in Practical Exercises to Experience Mental Health. And it always comes down to, the whole book is really about, always comes down to realizing that everything is a mental process, not a physical one. Mm-hmm. That's the general theme throughout the whole book, regardless of body issues. Mm-hmm. If you can just remember, first and foremost, the body isn't the decision maker. So when your body experiences symptoms, that's an effect. And you can remember to bring the effect back to cause, and saying the cause of all of it is my mind's choice, In other words, not that at this level you're choosing the symptoms, but whatever is going on with your body, you can choose to look and experience whatever's going on in the body differently. And you can use it for the Holy Spirit's purpose instead of the ego's purpose. So there are examples, you know, I give and how to do that. And one is, you know, if you're experiencing some kind of body issue or pain, and which we know pain can make the world seem very real. I think we all know that. If anybody's experienced pain, it's not always easy to make that shift. And as I was saying earlier, well, first step is to remember that it's a mental process, not a physical one. So you can change your mind about how you're experiencing the event, and call in the Holy Spirit, and imagine and visualize the beautiful white healing light of the Holy Spirit washing over you, through you, around you, so it becomes you, because that's what you really are in truth anyway. And so once you're very clear that you are joining with the Holy Spirit, and Holy Spirit is absolving you of guilt, and let go then to an attachment to a particular outcome. Just know that you are, when you're joining in your right mind with the Holy Spirit, it's being taken care of. But try to let go of any attachment to how things should be, like should be in your, you know, your way of viewing it, like with the ego. Because we can't judge that. We don't know what's best, you know, for everyone, and let alone ourselves. So we just don't really know. So I know what helps me is to let go of attachment to whatever the result is. The goal of the Course is, you know what? I can choose peace regardless of circumstances. I can choose peace regardless if my body appears to be sick or well. I want it to be well, but what if it isn't right now? Is that going to take away my peace? Am I going to lose my power over that to choose peace? And the answer is no, you don't have to let it overcome you in that way at the mental level. You know, you can remember that you're not a body, you know, that you are nothing less than God. You are innocent and whole and healed in the love of God. And as you stay in your right mind the best you can with this, you can trust that the effect will take care of itself in whatever way is most loving for you. And sometimes it shows up as symbols of your decision to be well. And your decision to join with Holy Spirit may show up as a symbol of, maybe for me, when I had a voice issue, the symbol of my decision to be well was it showed up in a book format. It was very helpful for me that I started to use some of the healing, natural healing remedies in this book as just a complement to my course practice, as a complement, not as the cause of healing, but just as a complement. And it really, really was helpful, and it helped me move through some challenging times with like allergies and things like that. But what I did first was I just joined in the mind first. I remembered to do the mental work first, and I do the forgiveness work, or you do then just let things fall into place from there. And you can be inspired and guided as to the most loving thing that you could do at this level. But anyway, I give some just other general examples too in the book of even just basic everyday things that people can do to help the ego relax. Simple things that don't even cost a lot of money, But things like even massage, you know, or drinking lots of water, taking walks, being out in nature. These are practical things that most people know about, but it's really applying it just like you would apply forgiveness. If you do these things, you start to see the benefits, you know, and sometimes we need combination approaches. Along with forgiveness, it's okay to use the world, the things of the world that we have that can help relax the ego.
Right. Exactly.
That's an important part of this, not to deny the world, right? We're not trying to deny this is our experience. Mm-hmm. So I make those points, some of those points too.
Those are all excellent and very helpful, aren't they? And I think that they echo, like you say, the decision in the mind to see that in truth we're all innocent, and in that decision then reflects in those expressions and behaviors that reflect that kindness to yourself and everyone, don't they?
Yeah, it really does. And then you're being a demonstration as well, like a great teacher, that others can choose the same too. In other words, if you're demonstrating in the face of great challenges that you can stay the best you can in your right mind and not making it too real, you know, you're not making it real, but you're doing the normal thing at the same time, you know, just walking the world as others do. In other words, even if you're going through a challenge, you're also being a great demonstration that, you know what, the separation hasn't occurred. It doesn't have to affect my reality as the Son of God. It doesn't have to affect my reality as totally innocent. And you're being a great teacher to other people as well, and showing them they can choose the same. That's really powerful stuff.
It is. And I think, like you say, Sandy, it shortens the gap. I think the more you practice those kind of things between the time you recognize an ego knee-jerk reaction, and then you say, you know, you ask that sort of inner question, how's that working out for me? And realize the ego's approach never has served us. And then decide against it. And that decision, gap in time can be shorter and shorter. And pretty soon it just becomes an automatic thing to say, you know, I don't think I'll go there today. I think my peace of mind, which is not a little gift, is more important than being right or wanting to make the misery real or whatever, that might take the form of. Huh?
Yes. Yeah. I think that's true. The gap becomes shorter. Yes. And you can eventually come to the place where you're in a state of mind where, as you said, you just automatically forgive, or you automatically go to the right mind. You automatically let go of judgment. And Arvin and Persis say in Gary's books that you become a master by having forgiving thought processes daily. I mean, when you're practicing that every day, and it eventually does become your whole part of your whole attitude, the attitude of forgiveness, where you can really truly live your life from that place all the time. And the Course says, you really can get to the place. It takes great willingness and effort, but you can get to the place where you only listen to the Holy Spirit. Like that's the only voice you hear. Jesus did, and he's teaching us we can do the same, where we can and we will get to that place. Everyone will get to that place.
It's a done deal, huh? We're just going through the script and and trying not to fight it too much, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, the ego will attack, but it always attacks. It tries. That's where the staying vigilant comes in. Being vigilant only for God and His kingdom. Keeping, applying that over and over, right? Over and over. Yeah.
I think one of the fun things to remember is that it's already happened. And you get illusions, not illusions, to that in the Course. Like Jesus will say, this world was over long ago, and you're reviewing mentally that which has already gone by. And, we saw a movie, one of our favorite movies in the last year that we've seen is called Arrival. And it shows how, these aliens who have been around a lot longer than we have, the way that they think is not linear. They don't think in a linear fashion. They think in a holographic fashion. And because they do, they see the future as well as the past. And they can experience any point in time, like now, because of the way that they think. And there's this language expert in the movie, and she's deciphering her language, learning their language. And as she does, she starts to think like they do. she's because the way that you think is very much influenced by the language that you have, and vice versa. So she starts to think like them, and she starts to see her future, because the future is already there and it's already happened. And now she's not thinking in a linear fashion anymore. She's thinking in a holographic fashion. And I think that that happens to a certain extent as you go along with any of us. We start to realize that, that lifetime that we thought that we were going to live 100 years from now in Chicago has already happened. So it's not really necessary to experience it again unless you have certain forgiveness lessons that you're going to experience to help you get there faster. But it's like Art and Persa kind of surprised me in the fourth book when they told me that, it's not really necessary for you to come back and experience that particular lifetime like you thought that you were going to, because it's already happened, and because you're learning so many forgiveness lessons in this lifetime, you don't have to experience that one necessarily. And that gave me, some pretty good encouragement that I was making progress. This book, my fourth book, is written as a standalone book. You don't have to have read my previous ones. And if you have, you'll enjoy it just as much. But it's also written for people who are not familiar with this work. And it was a little difficult for me to write because, there are teachings in this book that I was not really familiar with, because I pretty much stick to A Course in Miracles. But what Art and Persa do in this book is they, first of all, they give a historical connection between Jesus and Buddha that the world doesn't even know about. So this is something that's never been written about before. And I was surprised by it and excited about it, but it highlights 6 lifetimes that Jesus and Buddha shared in other incarnations. And of course, when I say incarnations, we're talking about dreams. We're talking about serial dreams. And I was, really happy about it, because I always wondered, how did Buddha get to be Buddha? How did Jesus get to be Jesus? What were they like in those few incarnations just before they were Jesus and Buddha? And this book actually answers those questions and, talks about the experiences that they had with each other in 6 particular lifetimes, starting, about 700 BC in Japan when they were Shintos. And it goes forward to the time of Lao Tzu in China. And these lifetimes in the illusion of time are about 100, 150 years apart. And Lao Tzu was kind of like a forerunner of Buddha, and was very much like Buddha, except in a Chinese culture. And sometimes there's so much alike that people mistakenly think that Buddha said something when it was actually said by Lao Tzu, and vice versa. And in these various lifetimes, they were people who had different relationships. They were friends, but they were also lovers. They were also cousins. They were also fellow students. And, it goes through these 6 lifetimes. And, there's a time as Hindus, and a time when they were students of Plato. And then there's the time of Buddha. And even though historically Buddhists don't believe that Buddha had a son, he actually did. And that's part of that experience. And it goes forward to the time of Jesus. And there's a common thread through all these lifetimes, because, most people don't realize that the great teachers in history had something in common. And that is that they were actually non-dualistic, because they were teaching that you've got 2 things. You've got the illusory world, which is temporary, and it's always shifting and changing. Then you've got reality, which is kind of like just beyond the illusion. And that's reality that does not shift or change. And what has happened all through history, and which is something that, I would prefer not happen with A Course in Miracles, is that people become students, and you have a teacher who is teaching, no, you've got to learn to look to the constant You have to look to the unchanging for reality. But then they take that teaching and they bring it right into the world, and they make the world real, and they start making everything real. And within 1 or 2 generations, all of a sudden, it's not about the reality anymore. It's about the illusion, which is why we have so many religions. And you have that, common thread, which ends up at the time of Jesus, not just being non-dualism. Dualism is where you make the unreal real. Non-duality is where you only make the real real. Pure non-dualism, which is where both Jesus and Buddha end up, is that you're recognizing that that reality, that thread that has gone all the way through now, is not non-specific. There is a specific identity to it, and the identity is God. So now they were recognizing God as the only reality, which is something that is missing, because you can't really undo the idea of separation from God without acknowledging God. So it would be like you're ignoring God. And of course, some people, they have a problem with God because they're always giving this religious connotation to it. But Jesus and Buddha were not religious; they were spiritual, and it was never their intention to start religions. That's something that's done by their followers within a few generations. Then before you know it, with Buddhism, you've got 80 volumes of stuff that you got to study. I don't have to tell you about Christianity and what happened with that. So,
and then there's the People's Front of Judea and the Judean People's Front, and it just goes on and on, right?
Yeah, then you get thousands of different denominations of everything, and people. I mean, I like Zen Buddhism, but it didn't even get started until probably 600 years after Buddha. So it's like you can't say that he was teaching something in particular. And what Art and Persa do is they point out what the teachers that they studied, these great teachers, were teaching was non-dualism. And eventually Jesus and Buddha realized there was something missing. And what was missing was God, which is why Jesus says in the Course that a sense of separation from God is the only lack you really need correct. And they both realized that in the end. And even though Siddhartha and his son, Buddha and Jesus, at the time of Buddha, they learned everything by then that they needed to know in order to be enlightened. They both realize, okay, there's one thing missing, and one says to the other, and I think you know what it is. And in that lifetime, Buddha was the teacher, and Jesus was kind of like his ultimate follower, because he understood as much as he did. And Buddha says to Jesus, okay, next time you be the teacher. You be the one that has to talk to all these people. And I'm gonna
sit back.
I'm gonna sit back and chill. And I thought it was interesting because in my first book, Art and Persa actually said that Buddha came back for one more illusory lifetime to review. And it turns out that it was at the time of Jesus, and that they knew each other, and that they were very close. And this book reveals, who Buddha was in that lifetime, which I didn't know, and it surprised me. And they both became enlightened very much at the same time. And the Course says that Jesus was the first one to complete his part perfectly, but I think that was because of the crucifixion, and that was his final forgiveness lesson. To actually go through the destruction of his body with no pain and with complete forgiveness, with no guilt in his mind, and to demonstrate that it is possible to not be affected in any way by this world, because you really are not the body, and it's possible to not identify at all with the body. And as the Course says, the guiltless mind cannot suffer anyway. If you've completed all of your lessons, then you're not going to feel pain. And they both knew that in the end. And I love the way that Art and Persa tie it all together, because they're also saying in the book, look, A Course in Miracles is purely non-dualistic. It's saying that God is the only reality and that nothing else is true. And yes, you can see symbols of spirit in the dream, and you can even experience God in the dream, but you have to remember, and this will save you a lot of time, you have to remember that the only reality is just beyond the veil. You know, it's just beyond the illusion. And there's a reality that is here that has never gone away. It's still here. And you can experience that instead of the illusion that the ego is trying to cover it over with and overlook the body. You know, not make the body real and then forgive it, which doesn't work. You got to kind of like overlook the body and realize that that person's reality is perfect oneness with God. And that's the fastest way to get in touch with the awareness of perfect oneness, which is your natural inheritance. But another thing that Arden first emphasized, and that I think Jesus and Buddha knew, was you know, that they're talking about something very big. You know, when they talk about your natural inheritance, they're talking about nothing less than the kingdom of heaven. You know, nothing less than God. And I think that a lot of course teachers, they make the course kind of small. You know, they make it personal and bring it into the world. And yes, you do apply it in the situations that you find yourself in. But what is just beyond the veil and what you're trying to achieve is something that is bigger than the universe of time and space. You know, it's something that can't be contained by that great projection that we thought was real. And so this is you know, a book of big teachings, and I'm excited about it. And you know, it was you know, difficult for me to write, not just because I wasn't familiar with some of the teachings, but they tell a lot of the stories, you know, personal stories that Jesus and Buddha shared with each other. And I wasn't used to writing down stories, and you know, kind of like I didn't know, you know, what you were supposed to do. I didn't know if you were supposed to italicize everything or use quotation marks or do
all
what,
the details.
you know, the details.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I had to be guided, and I worked for 3 years, you know, getting it together. And of course, the hard part for me, you know, the hardest part for me in my books is always my narration and my notes. And I give some of Cindy and I's personal experiences and forgiveness opportunities. And it takes me a long time because I got to feel like I captured the experience. And sometimes it takes me a long time to do that. And then there's, you know, they got all these different names in the book, you know, all these, and I have no aptitude for foreign languages at all. So you know, so I'll give you a couple of their names, right? You'll start to get what I mean. You know, it's like when they were
and all the different dates and time periods, you know, along with the names. Yeah, it's but there's a beautiful chart in the back of the book that will help people get more clarity, yeah, about that.
Yes, the chart was actually created by Mikey Lemieux.
Oh.
He went through the book and created this.
All right.
And it helps me because I have a hard time remembering these guys' names. But at the time, 700 BC Japan, they were friends named Saka and Hiroji. And you'll see later in the book that there was a woman that they were both in love with. And that was a forgiveness opportunity since they were friends. And in the chapter, the last chapter of lifetimes that they shared with each other at the time of Jesus, it's revealed, you know, who that woman was at the time. And that was a shocker to me. And at the time of Taoism, there was Xiao Li, who was a woman, and Wu San, who was a man. And that's when they were romantic partners, which is revealed in that chapter, and their forgiveness lessons are talked about. When they were Hindus, they were Harish and Padmaj, and they were both male, and they were cousins. And at the time of Plato's academy, they were Takis and Ikaros, and they were students of Plato. And
do you remember any of those names now?
Well, that's what the chart is for.
That's what the chart's for.
You sound right. and kudos to Giddy at Mikey for
yeah, he did that on his own. I mean,
cool.
Yeah.
And yes, they're actually students of Plato. They actually have a couple of conversations in the chapter that they had with Plato and with each other. And they realized, Plato, of course, was a genius, and he did realize that there was a reality that had nothing to do with this. But he still kind of like ended up making both of them real, even though he understood that one was more real than the other. I think he was making both of them real. And then, of course, at the time of Buddha, this chapter is called Siddhartha and his son. And it turned out that Jesus was Buddha's son in that lifetime. But I don't think I'm giving away too much, because they had certain lessons that they had to go through, and they were personal, and they had to be forgiven. And you got this theme of non-duality that's running all through it, which is what they're learning, and they come to these realizations where they end up being Yeshua, and of course everybody calls him Jesus, but his name was Yeshua. Oh, and by the way, a lot of people, Yeshua, kind of musical, and a lot of people refer to Buddha as Gautama, but my teachers don't use that name. They just use the name Siddhartha because they say that was the closest to his real name. And, they're not the first people to ever mention Buddha having a son, but they do have more specific forgiveness lessons involving Jesus and his wife, as well as his son, and the things that they had to go through to forgive each other. And then, in that final lifetime, you have Yeshua and someone named Nadav. And I'm not going to say who Nadav was. I'm going to let people read that for themselves. But there's an interesting connection between the disciples. And that's when they get to not just non-dualism, but what Arden Peirce would call pure non-dualism. And I think they were the first ones to coin that phrase. And that was in the Disappearance of the Universe. But they bring it, really all the way home to God. And in doing so, I think that they're saying, look, if you can realize that there's only one reality, when it says in the Course, be vigilant only for God and his kingdom, grant you, that's a pretty tall order at first, but you get used to it. The Course says miracles are habits, and you get used to thinking along a certain way. So if something happens that is affecting you, then you can switch from making the dream real to making God and his kingdom real. And that's a choice that anybody can make. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to, be the greatest spiritual teacher who ever lived in order to make that choice. We can all do that. And is it easy? No. But if you make that decision and you start getting into the habit of doing so, it gets to be fun. And it does get easier as the years go on because you get so used to it. You get into the habit of doing it so much that you would miss it if you don't do it. And, that Yeshua that you find in this book, the religious people think of Jesus as being like the ultimate leader. And actually, that's not true. He was actually the ultimate follower in the sense that, like he says in the Course, eventually I just listened to one voice. He only listened to the voice of the Holy Spirit. So in that sense, even though people looked at him as a leader, he was looking to the Holy Spirit as the leader. And that's something that we can all do. And the Course is kind of like tapping Course students on the shoulder also and saying, that's what you want to be vigilant for. There's a great quote, and Cindy used this quote even before I did in teaching. And it's one of my favorite quotes in the whole Course. They say that the alertness of the ego to the errors of other egos is not the kind of vigilance the Holy Spirit would have you maintain.
That's a great. Well, we both love quoting that. It's true. Because it's so true, isn't it? The alertness of the ego to the errors in other egos is not the kind of vigilance the Holy Spirit would have you maintain. That's a great thing to repeat.
Yes, and and you do meet A Course in Miracles students who are very vigilant to the errors of others, and they're very good at spotting the ego in somebody else, but that's not what the Course is teaching. The Course is saying you overlook the error and you don't make it real, and you forgive it. And if you're making it real, well, you've made it real, and so you cannot forgive it. So that's a choice that anybody can make. And I think that, this book really hammers home that idea of first non-dualism and then pure non-dualism in such a way. I can't see people reading this book and not wanting to stick to that message of pure non-dualism, once they get to it. And of course, I'm dreaming because I know that not everybody's going to do that. But at the same time, I think it's going to be helpful to people to do that.
Yeah. So many people have had questions over the years about this, about the past, illusory, but past lifetimes of Jesus and Buddha too. And here Art and Persa are giving this beautiful, story of them and how they undid the ego, which is really in alignment with the Course in Miracles. I mean, it takes tremendous practice. Like with anything to get good at it, you just got to practice it. Same thing with undoing the ego. It takes practice daily. Like if you're learning a new instrument, the only way to get good is to practice consistently at anything we do. So why not? Spirituality is the same thing. Like undoing the ego is exactly the same thing. You get better and better and more proficient at it, and more efficient at it when you do it over and over again. And I think it's more about, you do it with anything that comes up that disturbs your peace. And it doesn't matter how big or small it is. It's the small moments too that you want to just keep training the mind that anything, even if it's something really mild, do it, make it a habit of kind of catching yourself and saying, oh, well, that's a red flag too. Not just the seeming big stuff, but even the little things that disturb your peace, even if it's just a little bit. If you practice, generalizing everything, making it all the same, again, there's no hierarchy of illusions. You're either at peace or you're not, joyful or you're not, and so by daily applying it to anything that comes up right in front of your face is how you undo the ego, and you do it daily. And then it's a process over time, and everything else will take care of itself. And we don't have to worry about when Gary was talking earlier about what's beyond the veil. We don't have to worry about that. Beyond learning, as the Course says, what's beyond learning? What comes next after the ego is undone? That's already taken care of. That's already there. We're just chipping away at the guilt that stops us that keeps us from believing that we're already there. We're just chipping away daily. And that's what this path is about. The application, the practice. So, and Holy Spirit says, well, don't even focus on the past necessarily, or the future, because those are just defense. Those are tricks. Those are defense mechanisms against a present change of mind. So, that's why they say, hey, focus on this lifetime. As far as your forgiveness lessons, just whatever in any given day is upsetting you is what you want to forgive. That's your lesson. So, but that's a good thing. It's a blessing. It's an opportunity to awaken every single time.
Yeah, I think, we want to remember that a lot of these forgiveness lessons are holographic also. When the Course says trials are but lessons presented once again, so that where you made a faulty choice before. I don't think it's just talking about this one lifetime. I think, if you don't learn a lesson in one lifetime, you have that same lesson again in another lifetime. So we're always given another chance. Like the Course, says, take advantage of these opportunities, not because they won't return again, but because, delay of joy is needless.
Yeah.
Yes, but we're getting the same lessons now that we have before, and we didn't learn them all the way, and now we have another opportunity. And actually, this is our best opportunity because we're in a position to learn more today than we were 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, even though there are always people who knew the truth and knew it intuitively. A lot of them, like Jesus and Buddha, they didn't really buy into the dream. They didn't really believe in it. Even from the beginning, they kind of suspected that this ain't it, and that there's something else that is beyond this. And so I think that gave them kind of a head start over other people.
Yeah.
There must be a better way, as Helen and Bill said. Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They were certainly in that league, it would seem. Huh? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're all in that league, I suppose. We just don't realize it, and remembering that everyone is on that same path, I think can be really helpful. Like you said, to generalize and realize that, not only does it apply to my mind, but all the seemingly other minds, and if I can remember that, and I love that. I keep coming back to that lesson that in your Fearless Love audio, to see all of spirit in everyone and realize that everyone is really beyond that whole space-time dream that we're having.
Yeah.
And that is such a gift, isn't it? And to keep that in mind when we are tempted to be, short-tempered or frustrated or annoyed by circumstances, and like you're saying, Cindy, to dependent on outcomes or making our peace contingent on specifics in terms of the world. It's like, well, if I can just remember that, if I can look at every moment as a perfect classroom opportunity to forgive my decision-making faculty for believing it could even make a silly choice like that, then I get to let myself and everyone else off the hook in each of those moments. Yeah.
And one example quickly that this ego can show up, and that seems maybe like it's not a big deal, very mild, but we overlook it. Like I've seen sometimes the ego express itself in getting angry at appliances or machines, which computers, the blender in the kitchen, and I've seen banging on the appliances like this, like But that, I'm just saying, just something like that seems just like an everyday thing that it's too easy to overlook. That's a projection again on an object, right?
Absolutely. I have a
Kind of thing.
great example of that. If you've seen the Faulty Towers series with John Cleese.
Yeah. Oh,
there's one scene in there that is to me like the perfect epitome of that, where he's making this elaborate dinner for his house guests. And of course, he doesn't think his chef is up to the task, so he hires somebody across town, and he goes in his little dilapidated car to bring this sumptuous meal back to his guests, only to discover that his car once again is failing him. And so he finally decides to take out his frustrations by storming away from the car, and he says, "Okay, this is the last time, I've warned you." And then he comes, and then the camera is focused on the car, and then he comes back a moment later and starts thrashing the car like that's going to do some kind of good, But I think what a great metaphor for the way that we all think that hammering on the dream and hammering on the specifics in the dream is going to change the decision making process in the mind, huh?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great. And we've seen that in real life too. Like one person,
Yeah.
one person that Cindy knew. I'm not going to tell you who, but
I don't even know what he's getting.
he's talking to his dog, right? And the dog wouldn't do what he told him to do. And he's talking to the dog. He's saying, "I'm not going to tell you again. I'm not going to tell you again."
I'm not going to tell you again.
The language barrier, huh?
I'm not going to tell you again. It's just like you would say to a child, "I'm not going to tell you again." And then the dog just looking at him like with a blank stare, like what?
That's great. That's great.
But it can kind of be very humorous. Like you just rise above the split mind and the whole mind, and you can kind of laugh again. Remember to laugh at the silliness of the things we do here, that we really do, and remembering that, just to catch ourselves sometimes and go, what is this really doing? Is this helpful? In other words, is this helpful? Is this helping me to bring my peace? It may seem temporarily like you feel better in that moment because you're projecting. You feel like you're getting rid of something, but that's not really what's happening. That's an illusion. That's a trick. When you're projecting, it's coming right back to you. I always use this visual. When we point the finger and we're attacking like this, it's like the other hand is going like this at the same time. Mm-hmm. Because that's what's happening. Every time we project, we're doing it to ourselves. That's the whole message of the Course. I'm doing this into myself. And there's no exception for that. It's always the same.
Yeah. By the way, you mentioned John Cleese, and we love Faulty Towers. I think it was just a year or two ago. After a long time, I saw the movie once again, Life of Brian, with Monty Python. And if there are people who haven't seen that, I would say you got to see that, because it's just so irreverent, and it really lightens up the whole subject of Jesus and religion and everything.
A lot of great metaphors in that movie, yeah, and they're fun ones too. And speaking of movies, have you seen The Circle with Tom Hanks? Have you seen that one yet?
No, not yet.
Oh, check it out, because I saw it recently with some friends, and we were just kind of dumbstruck. I was noticing how so many ideals of the Course were trying to be applied on the level of form, which of course, it's never gonna work trying to fix the dream. But it's interesting because there's a lot of ideals about shared interest and openness, and the fact that there's really no secrets in truth. But then when you try to force that on the level of form, anyway, I just thought it was kind of interesting. So
Wow.
Yeah, that sounds really good. We'll check it out.
We'll check it out.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting film. So yeah.
You'll notice in my fourth book that I list my top 10 spiritual movies.
Oh, cool.
But it was after that I saw Arrival, so I couldn't include that, and I couldn't include The Circle, but we'll see it. And so I'll probably have some more in my next book. But I do point out some good spiritual movies that are well worth seeing. We love movies.
I would like to point out one right now that's one of my favorites, just for whoever's listening to this now, so they don't have to. I don't know if you mentioned it in your book or not. You might have, but just one movie, As It Is in Heaven.
Oh, I haven't even
The
heard of
director, I think we were told, or someone told us, the director was an A Course in Miracles student.
that. Oh, okay.
And it comes,
Long time, of course, in Miracles.
okay, and it comes through in the movie at certain parts. You can
Oh, okay.
certain lines where it reflects A Course in Miracles. It's very interesting. It's a drama, very well done, and the ending is particularly inspiring.
I'll check it out.
And I won't say what the ending is, but it's
Okay.
it's the use of sound at the end.
Okay.
Sound, and it's very, very well done, and it was an Oscar-nominated foreign film.
Oh, wow.
And I want people to know about it. If anybody doesn't, As It Is in Heaven, it's worth renting it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, the book it's from Sweden.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, the judge was a longtime Course student, and he actually uses a couple of direct quotations from the Course,
Oh, huh.
the movie.
Nice.
And there's a couple of themes of forgiveness in the movie, and somebody describing what judgment is compared to forgiveness, and it's really well done.
Very
Oh,
well.
Looking forward to that.
Storylines. Yeah.
No, I wouldn't say it's the happiest movie
Right,
in the
right.
world. It's a drama,
Yeah.
and there's some pain in
Yes,
it,
there is. Yeah.
but it's really great.
Neat.
And I do mention it as one of my top 10 favorite.
One more movie that if nobody's seen that I think is really a great one for shared interest is Joy Noel, which is a story about the actual ceasefire that happened on Christmas Eve.
That's right.
World War I.
We are familiar with that. That's right.
Yeah, that's a neat one, because it kind of highlights the insanity of warfare, not just on a literal sense, but in the mind, and how the real joy is recognizing that it's needless. Why wait for heaven? Needless suffering, and of course,
especially since it's a true story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So.
Wow. Yeah, that was that in that instant, and that holy instant.
Mhm.
You choose. That demonstrates that holy instant of ceasing all ego in that moment,
Right.
or whatever. Bringing it, changing your mind in that moment. Making a shift in that moment.
Literally dropping the implements of warfare,
Right.
but symbolically, whenever we can say, wait a minute, why have I picked up the sword again? How important is this grievance to me when I could forgive instead and be at peace at this moment? Yeah.
Right.
So Bruce, I hate to talk and run, but we're off the deck tomorrow, and we got 100 things to do before we leave. So.
Well, thank you for taking the time to share with everyone and all of us that are going to be watching this. And I'll put this on ACIM blog. And anyway, I'm eager to read both of your new books very much more than ever. So thank you for sharing extensively from those. And happy travels in the dreamscape. And thanks again for spending the time. And really appreciate it.
It was so fun to spend the time with you again.
Yeah, it's always
Yeah.
fun.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Yeah, we'll be in touch.
Okay.
Yeah,
Bye for now.
Okay, bye for now.
See everyone.
Bye.